Today we'll be continuing the sutra that we discussed last time, and it was the MAHԱVEDALLA Sutra, and even today we won't be able to finish it completely. We are dealing with today we talk about the Jhana. Last time we were talking about being and existence. Now this has been a conversation between advanced disciple of the Buddha, Mahathera, asking questions from Sariputta, the chief disciple of the Buddha. Now, he is a person who has been, he became an arahant without much effort. That means he has been practicing meditations in previous lives, and he was very advanced. And that is why he was made the chief disciple of the Buddha. And he was famous for knowing the teachings of the Buddha. The Mahathera is also a very advanced follower of the Buddha. But he is supposed to have come and asked these questions. So he is asking, earlier he was asking many things, but now we are dealing with his question about samadhi. That's the important thing to understand. So, this is page 390. I hope you have the... So the question is, friend, what is the first jhana? So he is asking Sariputta about the jhanas. So he answers, here, friend, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from wholesome states, unwholesome states, a bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought with rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. This is called the first jhana. These words that the translator used, they are not exactly the correct words that should have been used. So the real meaning doesn't come out properly. This is a problem. So when you say, friend, what is the first jhana, that is quite okay. Now you say, quite secluded from sensual pleasures. That word secluded is not a very good word. Seclusion, the word seclusion means something like hiding. So this is not something like hiding. A better word is the word withdrawal, withdrawn. To withdraw is to go back. It's the opposite of advance. To withdraw is to go back. Because the people are normally devoted to sensual pleasures. That means they are carried away by emotions. So whenever they see something beautiful, people want to go and look at this beautiful thing. So seclusion is to stop going after that. Going away from that. So, that is the first jhana, is to withdraw from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, and there again the unwholesome states means the impurities of mind. So you are withdrawn from sensual pleasures and also impurities of mind that accompany seeking sensual pleasures. And then the bhikkhu enters upon and abides in the first jhana. So gets into the first jhana. The word jhana I translated as standing out. That is we call it an ecstasy. Ecstasy means standing out. So you withdraw from the sensual pleasures and you remain outside the sensual world. You have come out of the sensual world. That is what it means. A bhikkhu enters and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought. That is also not a correct translation. Now, applied thought and sustained thought means you are holding on to something, a thought. You are holding on to a thought, and you are keeping stuck in it. But that is not what it is. It is the word that has been translated is vitakka and vichara. Vitakka vichara really refers to conceptual thinking. And the most basic form of conceptual thinking means you are forming a concept. And when forming a concept, you ask a question, what is this? And then you answer the question. If you look at a chair and ask, what is this? And then you answer, this is a chair. Those two things, asking the question and answering the question, that is the meaning of vitakka and vichara. Vichara is to ask the question, vitakka is to answer the question. And that is what they translate as applied thought and sustained thought, because they think it is concentrating on something. To concentrate on an object and hold on to that state of concentration. That is what they are thinking. But that is the wrong way of thinking. It is simply asking a question and answering the question. Vitakka vichara. That is how we form the concept. And then says, with rapture and pleasure, born of seclusion. Rapture and pleasure are also wrong translations. This is a translation of the two words piti, sukha, and also ekaggata. Piti, sukha, ekaggata. Piti is the state of the mind, priti. Sukha refers to the comfort in the body, the feeling of comfort in the body. Piti refers to a clarity of the mind. So, the word priti really is not even a presence. It is really an absence. Priti is an absence of emotional excitement. It is not the presence of an emotional excitement. It is the absence of emotional excitements. And only when the emotional excitement is absent that the body relaxes. And when the body relaxes, the body feels comfortable. That feeling of comfort comes from relaxation of the body. And the relaxation of the body comes from emptying the mind of emotions. When the mind is free of emotions. So Preeti really refers to a freedom of the mind of emotional excitements. So it's an absence rather than a presence. So that is why it is not rapture or pleasure. That is very important to understand. This is called the first jhana. So that was the description of the first jhana. Jhana is ecstasy, standing out. Ecstasy means to stand out. Now the next question is, friend, how many factors does the first jhana have? Now, those who have read about the first jhana or have studied the first jhana know that there are 5 factors, 5 parts, or 5 experiences in the first jhana. Preeti, the preeti is because the mind is free. The mind is free of the emotional excitement. The first jhana, 5 factors. The 5 factors in Pali words, vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, ekaggata. Vitakka, vichara, priti, sukha, ekaggata. 5. So, the questioning, the answering, the clarity of the mind, the comfortable state of the body, and ekaggata means the unification of the mind which is not divided into 2 and pulling in 2 different directions. That is what is called cognitive consonance. That is the unity or the unification of the mind. Then the next question arises, how many factors are abundant in the first jhana and how many factors are possessed? That means there are 5 factors that are abundant and 5 factors that the mind is occupied with 5 factors. The 5 factors that are to be abandoned are what are called the 5 hindrances or the 5 obstacles. What prevents the tranquility of mind. There are 5 things that stand as an obstacle to tranquility of mind or peace of mind. These 5 obstacles are vitakka, vichara, priti. Kama, chanda, vyapada, tina, midda, uddacca, kucca, vichikicca. The kama, chanda is the desire for sensual pleasure, kama. Kama is a sensual pleasure. Kamachan. Vyapada is anger, hatred. Tina midda is really the boredom and sleepiness. The mind becomes bored and maybe sleepy also. That is the tina midda. And uddajja kukucca is the mind being filled with worries and anxieties. The worries and anxieties of the mind, which are disturbances of the mind. And vichikicca is where the mind splits into 2, the cognitive dissonance. The emotions pulling in one direction and the rational thought pulling in another direction. So that is, those are the hindrances that or obstacles to tranquility and peace of mind. So those are the things that have to be abandoned. So these 5 things, the hindrances must be abandoned, and 5 other things to be cultivated. 5 things to be added, 5 things to be subtracted, and 5 things to be added. Now, 5 things to be added are just what we mentioned. So these are the 5 constituents of the first jhana. So this is only talking about the first jhana. So it's very important to understand how we enter the first jhana. Now some people think it is done by concentration. Now this clearly shows that what really happens is not concentration. It is, in one way we can call it a purity of the mind. And the other is to see it as a tranquility of the mind. So it's a purity and tranquility of the mind. How the mind becomes impure the Buddha pointed out that the mind becomes impure not from things that are already existing in the mind. The impurity comes from outside. This is why the Buddha doesn't speak about instincts. Like in modern psychology, Sigmund Freud was the person who spoke about instincts. That means the emotions are present inside and it is trying to come out, seeking an outlet. So it is important to understand that it is when the mind is free from emotional excitements and the mind is calm that one enters the first jhana. Because things are coming from outside, the most important thing to do is to guard the senses. It is through the senses that these impurities come. When we see something pleasant, a desire arises. When we see something unpleasant, a hatred arises. So it is very important to understand that purification of the mind is very important in the practice of the Dhamma. Our next thing that this sutra begins to discuss is understanding the mind. And in understanding the mind, most people think that mind is an entity separate from the body. Like two entities, mind and body. Even the two words that the Buddha used, nama and rupa, very often people think nama means the mind and rupa means the body. So they think there are two things called the body and the mind. But if we examine, we'll be examining that later, there is the sutra called the Mahathera Sutra. Mahathera Sutra. There a certain monk during the time of the Buddha, he was thinking that what is called the mind is something separate from the body, and not only something separate from the body, it can even come out of the body and travel somewhere else. Or it is also able to, when the body dies, it can come out of the body, and it is that mind that is reborn again. That means reincarnation. That word reincarnation has that same concept. The soul leaving the body at death and entering another body somewhere else. That is the meaning of the word reincarnation. Incarnation is to occupy a body, and that mental thing that is leaving the body and re-entering another body, that is what is called the soul. So this monk at that time, during the time of the Buddha, thought that it was this mind that is going and being reborn. And even today, there are many people who think like that. And sometimes when I tell them that this is wrong, they don't even believe what I am saying. They think rebirth takes place because it is the mind that is going, or it is the soul. And this is why they use the word reincarnation. There are two words that people use. One is called reincarnation, and the other is called transmigration. And both mean the same thing, that is that the soul goes out of the body at death and re-enters another body. That is rebirth. So, but the teaching of the Buddha is that there is no such thing. And the important thing that the Buddha points out is that what we call the mind is not an entity, but an activity. It's very important to use those two words, entity and activity. Entity is something that exists in time and space. It occupies time and space. An entity. But an activity doesn't exist. Activity is something that is going on, an activity. Like if you shake your hand, that is an activity, and it can be stopped. An activity can be started and it can be stopped. It is like the fan. When the fan is turning, that is an activity. And when you switch off the fan, it stops. So, but that activity of the fan is not something that exists. When you speak of existence, you are talking about an entity that exists. But an activity is not something that exists. It can only start and stop. So it's very important to understand this distinction. And so the mind is an activity and not an entity. It is an activity of the body. There are three activities that we refer to as the mind. Now, in this body, because the body is a living body, means, what is the meaning of living body? The body is living or alive means that there are activities going on in the body. That is the meaning of the body being living. If the body is dead, there are no activities going on in the body. That is why it is called dead. But if the body is not dead, all the time there are activities going on. One very important activity is the beating of the heart. And another important activity that we are all the time aware of is breathing. Breathing is an activity in the body. In the same way, when we eat, the food is digested. That is also an activity. So there are many activities going on in the body. But out of all these activities, there is a special kind of activity which is the activity of the nervous system. That means there are several parts of the body that belong to the nervous system. Now, there are various kinds of systems in the body. You know, there are various organs in the body. And these various organs are performing a certain function in the body. And when these organs, several organs together, perform one function, all those organs that perform that function are together called a system. Like we have what is called the circulatory system. That means pumping blood in the body. And there are so many arteries, so many veins, and there is the heart that does the pumping. All that belong to the circulatory system. In the same way, there is the nervous system. And in this nervous system, there are three important functions that the Buddha referred to, which are normally called the mind. One function is what is called perception. Perception refers to the activities of the five senses. We have five senses: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body. And these five senses are stimulated by the environment. When light falls on the eye is stimulated. Sounds coming to the ear is stimulated. Smells coming to the nose is stimulated. Taste coming to the tongue is stimulated. Touch coming to the body is stimulated. And when the senses are stimulated, the senses react to the stimulus. That reaction to the stimulus is what is called perception. When light falls on the eye, we see. Seeing is eye perception. When sounds come to the ears, we hear. Hearing is ear perception. When smells come to the nose, we smell. And that is nose perception. So in the same way, we have tongue perception and body perception. And that perception is what the Buddha called vijnana. So when the Buddha called vijnana, the clock has disappeared, huh? No clock. So anyway, so we have the Vijnana. Today, the word Vijnana is being translated by the English translators as consciousness, which is not a correct translation. So we have perception, and so here in this sutra, the question is, friend, these 5 faculties each have a separate field. Now there the faculties means the 5 senses that we just spoke of. So when the 5 senses, when they are being stimulated by the environment, that reaction creates sights, sounds, smells, tastes and touches. So the sight is very different from the sound, and the sound is different from the smell, and the smell is different from the taste, and the taste is different from the touch. These are all different. This is what this says. The 5 faculties each have a separate field, a separate domain, and do not experience each other's fields and domain. That is the eye faculty, the ear faculty, the nose faculty, the tongue faculty, and the body faculty. Now, it is very important to understand that now of these 5 faculties, each having a separate field, a separate domain, not experiencing each other's fields and domain, what is their resort? What experiences their fields and domains? Now that translation doesn't convey the idea properly. The question really is, where do these things ultimately lead to? Where does it go? That was the question. So the answer is, these 5 faculties, each having a separate field, a separate domain and so on, they have mind as their resort, and mind experiences their fields and domains. Now again, that word mind has been wrongly used there. What we are saying is that the word that the Buddha used was mano. The word mano. And the word mano refers to that place that thinks. The thinking is done. That is, according to modern scientific findings, That is what is called the cerebrum or the cerebral cortex. That is where the thinking is done. So that is the mano that the Buddha is talking about. And today the scientists are aware that there are nerves going from the eye to the brain, ear to the brain, nose to the brain, tongue to the brain, and from the whole body to the brain. There are nerves carrying messages like telephone wires. And these nerves send all the information derived from the five senses. All that information is sent to the brain, and the brain takes all that and thinks and compares all the five kinds of information and relates it to the past, the present and the future, and gives a meaning to what was seen or heard or smelled or tasted or touched. We have been saying this several times, and here the Buddha is saying these things, and this is why these questions was asked from the chief disciple Sariputta. And the chief disciple Sariputta answers this and points out that is what happens. Now, the important thing is, even today people begin to ask, well, if the cerebrum or the cerebral cortex is what is doing the thinking, then that thinking thing is ourselves. And that self is what goes on. But again, the Sariputta is saying that even that is dependent on conditions. Even that activity called mano really is not an entity but an activity. We are not really referring to an entity called the cerebrum or the cerebral cortex. We are referring to that activity that is called thinking. And that activity is dependent on conditions. And these conditions, there are five. These five faculties stand in dependence on vitality. Friend, what does vitality stand dependent on? Vitality stands on heat And what does heat stand on? Heat stands on vitality. Now, this is a very interesting thing. What is that thing called vitality? Vitality is simply now the translator couldn't find a better word, so he used the word vitality. But the better word that is used in science is what is called metabolism. Metabolism is that activity that keeps life going. And this thing called metabolism is a chemical activity. And that chemical activity has two parts. What is called anabolism and catabolism. Anabolism and catabolism together is metabolism. You know, the most important thing is this sugar molecule. That sugar molecule breaks up into water and carbon dioxide, and it releases energy. And it is that energy that runs the life. So this is very important, that breaking of the molecule and releasing energy. That is the catabolism. Anabolism is building up the sugar molecule. That is, the food we eat, there are different molecules come up, and then ultimately the sugar molecule is created by that. These different molecules coming up and create the sugar molecule, and then the sugar molecule breaks and releases energy. So all the time these two activities are going on, the building up process and the breaking down process. And this building up and breaking down is what is called metabolism. So those who have studied chemistry will know these things, that the sugar molecule comes in the form of C6H12O6 and breaks down into H2O and carbon dioxide, CO2. So these things I don't want to go into the chemical part. It's very the important thing is to understand that this is a breaking down and a building up process, and that is what is called metabolism. And because energy is released, that energy comes in the form of heat. And that is why in the body there is a temperature. The temperature is because the energy comes in the form of heat. This is why if you touch a dead body, it will be cold. So, but the activity of metabolism is based on heat, the energy that is coming up, and the energy that comes up is based on that breaking down. So the breaking down is based on the building up part, and the building up part is based on the breaking down part. So one supports the other, and so it continues. So it's a very important thing, that this thing called life. So this is why I say that what we call life is not some special entity or any person that has come up. It is simply an activity. All activities going on in this world, they are all electrochemical activities, electricity and chemistry. And even when we use those two words, electricity and chemistry, these are simply two words that the scientists have been using. It is just one activity. Even what is called electricity, these are not separate activities. The electricity is magnetism, and magnetism is electricity. These are not two different things. Only scientists are just using two words to describe these things. So these are just activities going on all the time. And everything is dependent on conditions. This is the important thing. There is no independent activity going on here. Everything is dependent on conditions. And this is why we speak of it as a law. And that law is called determinism. That law called determinism is the thing that is going on. It is not a law laid down by a ruler. It is simply an observation of the scientists. The scientists have observed that this activity is going on all the time. Everything depending on the necessary conditions. And this activity is the basic thing that is responsible for everything that is going on in the world. So this is why it is this activity that the Buddha called Paticca Samuppada. Paticca Samuppada means the same thing, determinism. Because Buddha didn't use that word, Buddha didn't use English words to talk. He used a Pali word which is Paticca Samuppada. Paticca Samuppada, Paticca. Paticca means something that is dependent on something else. That is the meaning of Paticca. So that is why we use the word antecedent. The word antecedent means an incident that is dependent on conditions. And so these things are happening all happening at the same time. That is why it is samuppada. Samuppada means it is happening at the same time. So if it is happening at the same time, we can't speak of a past, present and future. Even the past, present and future is a creation of our thinking. If we didn't have a thing called memory, we won't be talking about a thing called a past. If we didn't have a thing called imagination, we won't be thinking of a future. You see, past and future are creations of our mind, the mental process. And that mental process is creating the past, the present, the future, and the whole world is created through this mental process. This is what the Paticca Samuppada is talking about. So, we are not talking about a God who created the world. God itself is a static concept in a dynamic reality. The reality is dynamic in the sense that it is all the time an activity. There are no entities in the world. All entities are creations of our mind. There are no entities in the world. There are only activities. And activities start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. So there is no permanence to any activity. So this is what this sutra is really trying to point out, that everything is dependent on conditions. And of course there are many more things to talk about, but for today we can stop here. And we'll be going on next time to talk about the rest. You want to ask questions? If you want to ask questions, because there is no clock, you can go on asking questions.
No future, no past. Time is a mental creation.
Now I can hear you. No questions, huh? That's good. That means you have understood. So, if there are no questions, we can bring this to an end. Huh? You have a question? Okay. Yeah, you have one, huh? Doctor. Yeah.
Bhante. Thank you, Bhante, for your sharing. I just want to clarify with Bhante. the three main activities of the body that you always mention. One is the metabolism, two is the breathing, and number three, just now you explained, is related to the central and peripheral nervous system. Is that right?
Which one?
So the three main activities of the body, which we always call mind.
Yeah? What are the three?
The metabolism,
Huh?
the breathing,
Yeah?
and the third one is related to the nervous system, which is the central and the peripheral nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And under that one, you earlier mentioned there are three main things. So one is perception, which is vijnana. Two is, you didn't mention the other two and three, but could it be two, cognition, which is phasa? And number three, I'm trying to figure out what is it.
Chitta.
Chitta.
Chitta is the emotional part.
So the related to the nervous system is the perception, mano, and chitta.
Yeah. No. Mano and chitta and the
Vijnana,
activities of the vijnana, yeah, vijnana. These are the three.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Bhante, this is not so much a question, but to request you to elaborate on page 391, the number 20 onwards, talking about what we call the five hindrances.
391.
Yeah, page 391 on the top, item number 20. Friends, how many factors are abandoned in the first jhana, and how many factors are possessed? We understand the possessed ones, but we would appreciate perhaps your elaboration on the abandoned ones, the five hindrances, because the way it is mentioned here is very brief and not very clear. I think
Five hindrances, you know the five hindrances?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
They are mentioned here,
Yeah.
but there is no description about... Last week, during the Q&A forum in the Wisdom Room, you gave a very beautiful explanation
Of what?
of the five hindrances. How, when we indulge in sensual pleasures, we will experience ill will and kamachanda and vyapada.
Yeah.
And when we try to be good, then we will end up experiencing tinamida and udacha kukucha.
Yeah.
I think most of the people here are not aware of that explanation. Perhaps if you could elaborate on that again for the benefit of the others.
Yeah. Well, the important thing is that when we talk about the hindrances, we are really talking about emotional excitements, emotions. And the basic emotions are the desire for pleasure and the hatred of pain. Because all emotions are reactions to sensations. There are three kinds of sensations: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So, our reaction to these three kinds of sensations, the basic reaction is the desire for pleasure and the hatred of pain. And so, the neutral sensation we are not really desiring or hating, but we just think of letting it be. So, being comes from that, the idea of existence, being. And when we speak about the hindrances, the real hindrances are the desire for pleasure and the hatred of pain. These are the emotional reactions. But when we try to stop this, if we give up the desire for pleasure and the hatred of pain, what remains? Now if you tell a child, we won't give you any pleasant things, we won't give you any unpleasant things, and so you just be like that, what will the child do? The child will say, I am bored. And with that boredom comes sleepiness. That state is the Tinamidda. So when we speak of Tinamidda, we are really referring to that boredom and sleepiness, which is what we call laziness, is also the same thing. So, but on the other hand, if we say we should not be bored and we should be active, then we begin to become emotionally excited and begin to maybe worry about the past, or we begin to imagine the future, and so the anxiety and worry really comes from the past and the future. We worry about the past and we are anxious about the future. The anxiety is really a kind of fear. We are frightened something might happen in the future, or we might not pass our examinations, or maybe we might not get the job, or something like that, you see. What I want may not happen. So that kind of thinking is a kind of fear. And about the past, we worry about things that happened in the past. And so, these two things are the Uddacha Kukkucha. And then the Vicikiccha. Vicikiccha is where the mind begins to pull in two different directions. We cannot make a decision. Am I to go home, or am I going to stay here? Now we don't have a clock also. Is it time to go home? Now, like that, so two ways. Our emotion wants to go after pleasures, and our reasoning wants to go away from pleasures. So you see, we cannot make a proper decision. That is because our mind is pulling in two different directions. So this is why we find it difficult to practice the 5 precepts. It's good to practice the 5 precepts, but when you get angry, you want to take revenge on someone, or you want to go after something that is pleasant, which may not be good for you. So all these things are the hindrances that must be given up. So when these hindrances are given up, then the mind calms down. And there you get only concepts which are not emotional. Like if you are thinking, this is breathing in or this is breathing out, that is a concept. What is this? This is breathing in. What is that? This is breathing out. Or you may not be even thinking of breathing. Now if you just go and relax, you are only feeling a sensation which may be a neutral sensation, neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And if you are looking within and not outside, you are not looking at what you see or hear or smell or taste or touch. Your mind is not focusing on external things. Your mind is simply focused on whatever you are experiencing inside. And gradually you come to a state of emptiness, an absence, not a presence. And you begin to enjoy the absence, which is a peace of mind. That is how you gradually enter the first jhana. Okay, I hope you understood. Yeah? Another one, huh?
Okay, can Bhante maybe try to explain, because there's this current teaching about living in the present, in the now, and now that we understood there is no such thing as a past, present and future. So the present would be to refer to the
No,
body.
I'm not saying that you should live in the present, because you are simply living in an absence. So there is no present or past or future there, just an absence.
Can Bhante explain about living in the absence?
Well, the only thing is you will experience it only when you have done it. That means you have to first thing learn to guard the senses. Guarding the senses means you don't think about what you see or hear or smell or taste or touch. So when you are not focusing your attention on what you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, past memories can come into your mind. So you take your attention away from that also. Or you might think of the future, you take your attention away from that also. So your mind is focused within. You are not looking at anything else but what you are just experiencing within. So the first thing you might experience is simply your body. You are seated, and that seated body you are aware of. But gradually you begin to realize that the body is also an imaginary picture in your mind. So you become aware of a picture, and then you give up that, then you are left with a feeling, a sensation only. And then you can find out whether that is a emotional excitement, or is there a concept in your mind. As you keep on watching this, everything disappears and you begin to feel only a sensation, that's all. That's how it gradually disappears. Only by doing it you will be able to understand this. Okay.
Bhante, I understand that some reverends gave the explanation of skeptical doubt is doubt of the in the Buddha Dhamma Sangha. That gives the hindrances to the mind. Is that also the meaning for skeptical doubt?
Well, that word doubt is the wrong translation of vichikiccha. So this is why I don't use the word doubt. It is not doubt, it is the mind being divided into two. So it's what I call the cognitive dissonance. Mind getting divided into two. There the Buddha, to explain this, used an analogy. The analogy is the blind man and the crippled man. The blind man met the crippled man, and the blind man told the crippled man, now you don't have legs to walk, but you have eyes to see. I don't have eyes to see, but I have legs to walk. Why don't we get together? I will carry you on my shoulder and you direct the way. I will follow what you are saying. And so he put the man on the shoulders, and so it says, now you go forward, turn left, turn right, and so on. So it went on for some time, but then later, of course, the blind man began to think, every day I am listening to this man, why should I be just blindly following this man? I will go my way, and started going his way. And ultimately they went and fell into a big pit, and both of them died as a result. So in the same way, our thinking part is like the eye, and the emotion is like the legs that can go. But these two begin to split and go in two different directions, then the whole life is destroyed as a result. So this is the real vichikiccha. It's not just doubt. That's the important thing to understand. Okay, any other questions? So we bring our day to an end. Next time we have something more to talk about these dependent things.